welcome to our very, very large room for discussing school finance this morning. My name is James Golson. I'm the Education Policy Analyst with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And as I said, today we're discussing school finance. And how we fund our schools is one of the most important issues that the Texas legislature is tasked with orchestrating, as it impacts literally millions of students and thousands of educators on a year-to-year basis. Historically speaking, it's also one of the most controversial issues in Texas politics. Our long history of finance litigation is indicative of the fact that we have failed over time to find a viable and sustainable long-term formula. What we have consistently done through the years is increase education spending. We have increased the mandates under which our school districts operate and regulated the manner in which they have to spend the dollars we do give them. And we have grown our administrative ranks and our support staff ranks at a far higher rate than we have grown the ranks of our in-classroom educators. That's a very brief look at the environment in Texas school finance today. I want to give as much time to our panel as possible, so I'm going to turn it over here early. But this is finding a long-term viable solution to Texas school finance is, or at least bringing stability to the system, has been a major challenge to date. And I'm hoping that our great panelists here can offer their insights on where they think we are and what we think solutions can be going forward for our education system. Our first speaker today will be the Honorable Kent Grusendorf. Mr. Grusendorf represented Arlington, Texas from 1987 to 2007 in the Texas legislature. During that time, he served, at least for a spell of it, as chairman of the Public Education Committee, where his carried school accountability and improvement initiatives for a series of Governors Clements, Governor Richards, Governor Bush, and finally Governor Perry. At the national level, he has served on the Southern Regional Education Board's Executive Committee and in the past as chairman of the American Legislative Exchange Council's Education Task Force. Please welcome the Honorable Kent Grusendorf.
Thanks, James. I want to talk to you all about efficiency today. And a little bit of the problem that you explained there, that we really haven't found a permanent solution to this problem, I think hinges in part because we don't really look at what the Supreme Court has been saying for almost 30 years of litigation. And to start off, though, I want to think about something with you. What if you had a room full of politicians talking about, hey, private sector can do it more efficiently. The others saying, hey, the public sector can do it more efficiently. Some saying, hey, you got to have more money. Others saying, no, you don't have to have more money. Hey, Massachusetts did it. They're a bunch of liberals. Don't pay attention to them. Think about this kind of debate. Well, where do you think that debate took place? That debate took place only a few blocks from here in Austin, Texas in 1875. They were debating the Texas Constitution that we currently have in place today. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that Constitution actually says. But at the time, in 1875, progressives were trying to socialize education. The debate lasted a long time, and there was a lot of compromise, and they really had a difficult time reaching a conclusion. But it did not, the Texas Constitution does not prescribe that the public school or that the ISDs have a monopoly on education in Texas. Now, I'm not criticizing school districts. We've got a lot of great school districts around the state. But a point I want to make clear is the Texas Constitution does not require that they have a monopoly over educating our kids. That's strictly a legislative decision. But anyway, this debate went on. They kept going back and forth. Committees couldn't reach a decision. It was really the most contentious issue in 1875 debates. And they were reacting to what the liberals had imposed on them during Reconstruction, a very centralized top-down system of education, highly bureaucratic, highly centralized. And the Constitution, in the end, in 1875, what it provided for was an efficient system. And I think that was the compromise language. The word efficient didn't show up until it came back in the final language and final compromise that finally passed after a number of other proposals had failed. But it allowed any group of parents to hire a teacher, start a school, and be reimbursed from the state. They basically had charter schools in the early 1900s in the state of Texas. We think, and I carried the charter school for Bush in '95, we think a charter school is a new concept. It's an old concept, folks. It's what they did back then. Billy Walker in Edgewood 3, I believe, filed with the court this language of what his interpretation was of the original intent of the Constitution. Look at it. He's saying they were conservative. They didn't want a top-down system. What do we have today? We have a highly regulated system with way too many decisions being made in Austin, Texas. We have thousands of kids, folks, that are trapped in underperforming schools. I think the number last year is 314,000 kids trapped in campuses that are unacceptable. And we have thousands of teachers that are underpaid and the bureaucratic system which stifles their creativity. We're not spending our money as wisely as we should. Now, I want to talk to you about the final language that they came up with in the constitutional debates of 1875. A general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation and liberties. The purpose of this clause is the liberties and rights of the people. It shall be the duty, in order to protect the liberties and rights, it will be the duty of the legislature of the state to establish and make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools. Now, we use the term public education today, but at the time, public free schools does not mean publicly run. It means open to the public and free of tuition. Texas Supreme Court has said, quote, the Constitution does not dictate the structure of the system. And this is back to the point I made earlier. That's a legislative decision. Fast forward to the 1980s and what's been happening in recent litigation over the last 3 decades. The court ruled and hung all of its rulings on the word efficient in the Texas Constitution. Liberal politicians and the media and others have really sort of shifted that focus and talked about equity. Equity. It does not say equity in the Constitution. It says efficiency. And the court has consistently said that efficiency means productive of results. But all of the talk and all the litigation has been about money. The Supreme Court has consistently sent a different signal. And here I just listed the various cases, and just from a personal point of view, this first Edgewood 1 decision, the trial court decision, came down in my freshman term in the legislature. The West Orange, the last decision, came down in my last term in the legislature. So I served on the education committees and every select committee that dealt with all these issues over the years, so I was pretty involved in the school finance problem. And we didn't solve it, folks. Look at what the Supreme Court has said. They said in Edgewood 1, and they have repeated this in every one of the lawsuits since that time. Efficient conveys the meaning of effective or productive of results and connotes the use of resources so as to produce results with little waste. Now, why does the Supreme Court keep saying that? I think because they mean it. But what happened in 2011, and again, two-thirds of the school districts in the state filed suit against the state for more money and more equity. They didn't mention efficiency as the court talked about it and productive results. So 2011, the school districts. In 2012, we intervened. The Texas Association of Business, Tree, and 5 families. We intervened and put the issue of efficiency before the courts. The judge never ruled. Last year he talked about what he was going to rule, but he never issued a written ruling. So therefore, in 10 days, he's opening up the lawsuit again to take testimony about what's happened in 2013 session. But now, unlike every other one of the cases in the past, the true issue of efficiency is before the court. The prior cases all focused on money for school districts. Really, students have been used as pawns in this process, folks. The stakeholders have been driving the process, and taxpayers have been expected to pick up the tab. But the Supreme Court has consistently invited a broader question of efficiency and productive results. We RSVP'd to that request by the court. And here I'm going to cite a few of the times that the court suggested that we needed to do this. We have not been called upon to consider, for example, the improvements in education which could be realized by eliminating gross waste in the bureaucratic administration of the system. That's pretty straightforward. We've not been called upon. It is true that the plaintiffs have focused on funding. We cannot dictate how the parties present their case or reject their contentions simply because we would prefer to address others. So now we have the issue, which I believe they're asking for, of efficiency before the courts. It's 3 decades of litigation. The system basically, the legislature created school districts. The system's basically suing itself. Well, we got one branch of government suing another branch of government for more money because this branch of government didn't give this branch of government enough money. There's something wrong with that system. Texas Supreme Court in West Orange said, in Edgewood 3, we explained that although the issues brought before us in Edgewood 1, Edgewood 2, and Edgewood 3 have all been limited to financing of the public schools as opposed to other aspects of their operation. Money is not the only issue, and money is not the only solution. But what is all the press coverage and most of the litigation coverage by the school districts been about? It's been about more money. To quote the court again, while we consider the financial component of efficiency to be implicit in the Constitution's mandate, the qualitative component is explicit. Efficiency is explicit. Adequacy and equity are only implicit. And this is the first time in 30 years of litigation that the true issue of efficiency has been before the courts. And there hasn't been a lot of news coverage on this case. Most of the news coverage has still been about more money for school districts. For the first time, the real issue of what's best for kids, what's real equity for kids, real efficiency for the system is now before the courts. We don't anticipate a positive ruling from the trial judge in Austin, Texas, or Travis County, but we do anticipate that we have answered the invitation of the Texas Supreme Court, and we expect to win at the Supreme Court level. Footnote here, the Texas Supreme Court even suggested school choice. They said perhaps public education could benefit from more competition, but the parties have not raised that argument, and therefore we do not address it. The argument is now before the courts. Folks, we can and we must do a better job of educating our kids. Nothing in this state and in this country is more important than the education of our youth. We have to keep in mind, we all we all support our schools, public schools. We've got to keep in mind, schools are only important to the extent that they benefit kids. Every school is not perfect for every child. And no child is a perfect fit for every school. What's the question? Is it about kids or is it about institutions? The system, I think, in order to meet the constitutional mandate, must be restructured to produce meaningful results for kids. And here's another quote from the court. There is substantial evidence, which again districts of court have credited, the public education system has reached a point where continued improvement will not be possible absent significant change, whether that change take the form of increased funding, improved efficiencies, or better methods of education. The court has consistently been asking that the legislature address real restructure of the system. In order to meet constitutional efficiency, in my opinion, the legislature must eliminate mandates that prohibits school districts and superintendents from making rational choices about their staffing. I mean, our labor laws are absolutely ridiculous, folks, and they harm kids. The labor laws are in place to protect adults. Nothing in those labor laws is there for efficiency, as the Constitution requires, or to protect kids. We need to take full advantage of today's technology. I put a decade on here, but I really believe that our school system, as compared to other professions, is probably 2 or 3 decades behind other professions in the use of technology. Think about it, folks. You walk into a Walmart or something, you buy something, today's technology, they know at the manufacturer's level that that product has been sold and that they're going to need to restock it. What do we do with kids? We have a stupid statewide system that analyzes where they are once a year, and not every year, just some of the years. We need to be tracking students on a daily basis. We need to free teachers up to do a better job, stop imposing all these mandates on them, allow superintendents to do a better job. The system has to be changed to allow rational decisions to be made for the benefit of kids. We've got to allocate our money, but we spend between $50 and $60 billion a year in the state of Texas in public education. A quarter of our kids don't graduate. Of those that go to college, almost half of them have to take remedial classes. We're doing something wrong, folks. What's the future of our state and our society going to look like if we don't do something better than we're doing today? We've got to get rid of these state mandates. Every bit of research says that the greater the autonomy at the campus level, the better results you have for kids. People closest to the kids can make the best decisions for the kids. But yet we make way too many decisions in Austin, Texas. Most importantly, in my opinion, you're never going to have an efficient system unless you stop restricting supply, allow more charter schools. Why is there any cap on charter schools? There's no rational reason for it except to protect stakeholders and unions and interest groups. If it benefits kids, let them go there. We need to allow for supply side change, and we need to allow for consumer choice. Scholarships, tax credits, taxpayer savings grants. We need to do everything we can to allow every child to have the best possible education in the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Pulling up our second presentation here.
Sure, no problem.
All right, our second speaker today is Representative James Frank. He is entering his second term in the Texas legislature in 2015, following a long career in finance. He has a degree in finance from Texas A&M University.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you.
I'm a Longhorn, so.
We get over that.
He's done banking business in long career in Fort Worth and from his hometown and I believe your hometown, Wichita Falls. This is a man that knows numbers. Please welcome Representative James Frank.
Or not without messing
Hang on,
up.
we'll get that back up.
All right. Thank you all for being here and being a part of this very important topic, and appreciate TPPF hosting this forum, and I especially appreciate them putting me between two experts because it would make it very awkward for y'all to walk out while I'm talking, so appreciate that. One of the things I found in my first session was one of the real challenges you have in communicating on the floor or in politics is definitions. When we use words, sometimes they mean different things to different people. And I'm going to talk about efficiency today, as Mr. Grusendorf did, but I want to define it first because efficiency means one thing to me, and the courts define it one way, the Constitution may define it another way, and so I want to define it for you the way I'm going to use it. Efficiency is really using a given set of resources to fulfill your goal as well as possible. Okay? It's using a set of resources, in this case we're talking money, to fulfill the goal, and obviously public education, the goal is educating kids. Okay, so at the end of the day, when I'm saying efficiency, I am not making a value statement on whether we have enough or too much. That's a great debate. We have it all the time. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is whether or not we are spending the money that we have in the way that best helps the kids. And I'm going to show you some data to point that out. So I'm not discussing adequacy. So that's the first definition. The second definition I want to talk about is numbers. One of the other frustrations I have is every time somebody sends me a set of numbers, they always have an amazing amount of bias in them. Okay, and so the first thing I always ask is, where are you getting these numbers? Because frankly, people make up numbers a lot. I see nods from my fellow members and senators that are here. Yeah, because we get numbers that are not accurate, and so I'm always very careful where I get numbers. My numbers are not always perfect, but I always try to go to source data, and that is consistent over time, because the other thing we have a really great habit of doing is changing the way we're accounting for things part of the way through. So the source of my numbers comes from TEA, and actually it's really because that's the first place I looked when I started studying this subject. They have a TEA Pocket Edition, which is a great thing. You ought to pick it up, and they've been doing it for about 20 years. So when I asked Jim Johnson, my chief of staff, to get me the numbers, he went back as far as the directory was, which was 20 years. And so that's what you're going to look at, is a 20-year number. Now, the reason I didn't go any further and the reason I wanted to show the full 20 years, frankly, is 20 years is a great data point, because 20 years is enough to see real trends, but we're not talking about the 40s and 50s. Most of us are old enough in here to actually remember 1991, okay? And so I think the information is important. The final thing I want to clarify when I talk about numbers is I always talk about numbers, the total revenue coming in, the total expenditures for a school, not just the state expenditure. One of the most frustrating things, I sat in on the education finance deal 2 years ago as a candidate, and I kept hearing people talk about $5,000 per kid. And I was like, why are they talking about $5,000 per kid? Because I was looking at the TEA Pocket Directory, and it was showing $11,500, and then I realized, no, they're just talking about the state, they're not talking about the local, they're not talking about the federal. And the reality is, in order to get a really efficient look, somebody has to look at the global picture, not just our own myopic view of what we are spending as a state, because at the end of the day, the Constitution requires it upon us to provide the education system. And so it really is primarily a state responsibility. And so when I talk about it, in fact, I would tell people that, a lot of times people say, well, we have three revenue systems, or we have three sources of revenue for schools because we need it. No, we don't. Okay, we say there's three, there's federal, state, and local. There's not three, there's one. It's the taxpayer. That's it. The money comes all out of the same pocket. What we do have in the state is we have three collection mechanisms. We have three revenue redistribution mechanisms, and then worst of all, we have three places that make rules. Okay? If you wonder why you have trouble being efficient, that's part of it. So with all that being said, those are the definitions I want to go in. And then I've got two assumptions that I would like to make and see if you agree with. One is that based on my definition of efficiency, almost everybody except the most crazy person wants us to be more efficient with the money we spend. It is in everyone's best interest to spend whatever money. When we have these long debates and we finally get to a number that we spend, everybody should want that money spent as well as possible. I hope we can agree on that. I'm sure there's some vendors out there that maybe don't want it. They want, but by and large, I think everybody on all sides of the political aisle, whether you think $11,500 is the right number, or you think it should be $1,000 a year, or you think it should be $100,000 a year, once we decide on that number, everybody wants it to be spent well to most benefit the kid. So that's the first assumption. And the second assumption, and I think everybody will agree with this, because I think test after test would say that, study after study would show that after the home environment, the most important thing is to a school's ability to educate kids is having high quality, well-trained, motivated teachers in the classroom. that after the home environment, which is always number one, the most important thing is having highly trained, motivated teachers in the classroom, that's where the rubber meets the road. All of the other stuff that may be necessary to run a school is important, but it's not the primary. So if you're going to be efficient, you're going to try to focus your dollars on, you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? If you want the money to be spent well, you're going to spend it on that. So with all that being said, I want to take a look at just the numbers, and again, straight from TEA, of how we have done over the last 20 years in the state of Texas at directing our dollars into the classroom. So this is a chart. It shows back in '91 we had 3 million. For those of you who can't read it, I know a lot are in the back, so I'll read the important parts. 3,500,000 or 3,500,000 kids back 20 years ago. 10 years later, we've got 5 million kids. That's a 44% increase. So keep that number in your mind. It's a 44% increase. Now, how have we done on education? If teachers are the most important, how have we done at keeping up with the teachers that we are financing? So here you go in '91, and y'all can't read that. So go ahead and go to the end. We have now 324,000 teachers. I'm sorry, back 20 years ago we had 212,000, and now we've gone up to 324,000 teachers. It's a 52% increase. With a 44% increase in kids, we have a 52% increase in teachers. And that's pretty good. And this is just the professional teachers. This doesn't count. I've excluded from everything. I've excluded teachers' aides, administrative secretaries on the other side. Now, that's pretty good. Before you pat yourself on the back too much, that's not a huge increase considering the money that we've put in. And really, if you use different years, you might have slightly different results other than 8%. You might have a little less, you might have a little more. But certainly, at a minimum, we have kept up with the number of teachers in the classroom. So why am I up here? It's the next slide. We're going to show you the same number of student population. And then this number right here is the other professional staff. This is other professional staff in the classroom. And just to give you an idea, and we can talk about it in the Q&A if we want, professional staff's average salary is $61,000 a year compared to the average teacher, which is just under $50,000. So these are people that the sum total of our collective decisions at the state, the federal, state, and local, that we've said these are even more important to have than teachers. You know what growth that is? It's going from 39,800 to 83,000 in 20 years for a 210% growth. Let me put that in.
That's not 210%. 210% would be like 120,000. Something's got to be wrong with your number.
No, it's 210. It's more than double. It's just over double. I appreciate that, but
That'd be 110% growth.
no.
It starts out at 100%. 1, 2, 3.
Can we agree that it's a doubling and move from there? It's a doubling. It's more than double.
It's too much.
It's too much. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Check that. All right. So, that number, I want to convert that to some numbers that may be meaningful to you. Let's pretend for a minute. Let's go back, because I don't think for a second that 20 years ago the federal government and the state government got together and said, you know what, to improve the educational performance of kids, we need to go crazy with the other professional staff. We need to do everything we can to increase that. You know, we need to keep up with teachers, but we need to really go nuts with the I don't think that happened. But the reality is the sum total of our legislative actions at the federal level and the state level and at the district level have caused that to happen. If we had just kept the growth in other professionals at the same growth as kids, if we had done it at 44% and said, okay, these people are important, but we're going to keep it at the same rate. You want to guess how many teachers that we could hire with the exact same amount of money? 33,800 teachers. You could have 33,000 more teachers at the $50,000 pay rate in Texas classrooms. That's a 10% increase. Or if you say, you know what, we have enough teachers, we just don't pay them enough. There's $1.6 billion spent here outside of the classroom that should have and could have been spent inside the classroom. So hopefully you would agree at least that that is a concern, that that is something that ought to be addressed, and frankly is a trend that needs to stop very quickly. I think the question always, and this is much harder, is why did it happen? Because I really, like I said, I don't think this was a plot. I think it just happened. And it happened because of the unintended consequences of our actions. I've got a couple of illustrations of why I think it happened. The first is a little cartoon. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, cartoon. And again, I didn't realize the room would be quite so long, but this is your puppet of educators. You have the federal government, again, handing out money and rules, state government, money and rules, and school districts, or local, with money and rules. If you, this is what your school districts get. If you haven't talked to a superintendent, this is the board policy manual from TASB, and I am quite certain that it's got great stuff in there, and if some TASB people are in here, I'm certain there's some great stuff in here. I just happen to have a guy that works for me that's on the TASB board, so he let me get that. So that's really helpful with educating kids. Here's the Texas School Law Bulletin that goes to all of your districts. This is this year's update. This is not all of them. This is this year's update. Okay, and the problem with all of that is somebody has to write them, and who pays for those? We do. Somebody has to read them at your district level. Who pays for that? We do. Then somebody gets to audit that. Who pays for that? And then we get into a whole system of this government entity finding this government entity and fighting each other. And the whole time, none of those people that we're talking about are doing one thing to help educate the kids. None. And at the end of the day, we have to address it. And so I want to leave you optimistic, not pessimistic. At the end of the day, I think if we can spend half as much energy discussing how to efficiently and effectively spend money that we do on how much money to spend, because all of the discussion that we have, all of the discussion we have is how much. And at the end of the day, we're never, ever going to solve that. No matter how much money we spend, we're going to have a significant group saying it's not enough. And we're going to have a significant group saying it's too much. We need to spend much more time having the discussions of how we get money better spent in the classrooms. And I think if we do that, then students, and for that matter, teachers, if we address this in Texas, will be much better off. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Frank. Our final presenter for today is Gary Godsey. Gary is the almost brand new executive director of the Association of Texas Professional Educators, which I believe is the largest such group in the state of Texas.
In the nation.
In the nation. Gary, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have an aspiration today. It's to get one amen out of this gentleman sitting on the front row, and I bet it doesn't happen. Thank you for inviting me today. They gave me credit for being an expert. I'm not an expert on education. I am an expert perhaps on organizational development, on building out systems, on understanding how you aspire to develop programs and then get them funded properly. Perhaps you could call me an expert in that area, but not in education. I think it's an advantage for me on this job, actually, as the executive for the Association of Texas Professional Educators. I wanted you to know about our organization. We're not a union. Everyone thinks we're a union. In fact, one of our major tenets is we stand for the right to work. We oppose collective bargaining, and we also oppose any kind of strikes by professional educators in the state of Texas to get something they want. We have 110,000 members in the state of Texas. About 95,000 of them are actually classroom teachers. We have about 10,000 administrators who are part of ATPE, and then the rest are paraprofessionals and others. We are an inclusive organization, not just limited just to classroom teachers. So we've got a pretty powerful voice. We've got a lot of information. We listen to our members very carefully. And one of the things that I've been trying to do is listen more than talk over the last 6 months as I've become the executive of the organization. So my perspective is coming to you certainly as the executive of ATPE, but it's also coming to you as a parent who sent their kids to Texas public schools, who graduated two phenomenal professionals, adults now they're in their 30s, who are extremely successful because they had the advantage of going to school in Texas Public Schools. And I think that they were more well-rounded perhaps than they could have been in other states we lived in, because they got a pretty good experience here in Texas. A couple of things about me just to set the tone for what I'm going to talk about. I was the national CEO of a foundation based in Kansas City, Missouri for the last 2 years. I had a brief lapse in judgment and left Texas to be convinced to run this national foundation. I spent three days a week on an airplane, coast to coast, somewhere in America, for 52 weeks of 2012. And I came home in January of 2013, and I told my wife, who had only made it to Kansas City 6 months earlier because our house took a while to sell in Dallas, I can't do this. I'm not going to spend the next 6 or 8 years of my working career, whatever it is, on an airplane somewhere in America. I want to get passionate about something where I can make a difference. And I know it sounds corny, and ATPE presented itself, and now the rest is history. I couldn't be prouder to be associated with public education. 5.1 million students in the state of Texas, about 700,000 new students in the system since the decade began of 2000. The impact that we will have on the nation and the world by graduating these students is just going to be amazing. So we have a responsibility and a duty, I think, to make sure that public education gets its fair shake in terms of funding. And we can debate the numbers until we're blue in the face. I think it's about $8,500 a student that gets spent on Texas public school students. The Legislative Budget Board says in real constant dollars for inflation related that we're spending exactly the same amount of money we were spending in 2003 on public education in 2013. So that came straight, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking this stuff up like you are, and I'm learning it. But I think they're a pretty neutral body, and you can look at the numbers yourself. I don't think money's the key to all of this by any means, but it's certainly a factor in it. And you can debate whether Texas is 40th or 49th in per pupil spending, but it's down there, and that's just a fact. So what I'd like to do today is change the conversation just a little bit, if possible. And I'd like to talk about aspirations as opposed to historical funding. How do we aspire to build a system, first of all, that does what James Golson said, and I want to begin with the end. He wrote an article on December the 13th. He wrote, by the way, don't ever put anything in print you don't want to see in the Austin American-Statesman or have somebody read from the podium. And the last sentence wrapped it up for me. Let's put students first, period. If we all embrace that and agree that we can put students first, then the rest of this stuff potentially could take care of itself.
You got an amen.
Okay, good. I liked it. And you said it, I agree with that. Let's put students first. I want to paint a brief scenario for you. Imagine yourself in a classroom with 22 kids, 100% on free lunch. 14 have no parents. They're either being raised by a grandparent, which is pretty prevalent, a foster parent, or they have no parents. They might have parents. Parents aren't parenting. 8 students had to translate the parent-teacher conference because only Spanish or another language, Vietnamese was one of the languages being spoken in this classroom. So a student had to translate for the teacher, who was a master-level teacher, the parent-student conference. The teacher spent $2,133 out of her pocket that year for school supplies, for making sure that all 22 students had the stuff on the list that the district puts out, because she knew that when the students showed up, the 14 of them on free lunch or reduced lunch, that they probably wouldn't have the resources. And then she spent numerous amounts of money out of her pocket. Her final salary was $41,136 with 28 years experience. She was told she had to teach to the test, that she could no longer capture a teachable moment anymore. She couldn't teach civics. She broke up a fight on the playground where she put her hand on one student's chest, a first grader beating up a second grader, and she was sued by one of the parents who said, "You can't touch my child." There's no discipline, and the threat of lawsuits caused her to retire in 2008. That's my wife, who was a lifelong educator who gave her heart and soul, mostly in Texas, but was driven out of the classroom because of those conditions. That's got to change. I think there's a few fundamental things at ATPE we believe in. We believe in local control. We think that public education dollars ought to be driven into the public education system. It sounds simple, but it's really not. A lot of people would like to divert dollars to vouchers and other things. And I was on a radio show recently, and I'm just telling you my experience. And a caller called in and said, ATP, you guys are a bunch of jokes because you won't support vouchers. And I said to him, what are you going to do if we give you an $8,000 voucher and you want to send your kid to a private school? How are you going to pay the differential, the $12,000 differential that you're going to have to come up with to send your kid to a private school? Texas schools already have choice. I mean, if you want to, in many districts, if you want to move your child from one school to another, you can do that. And I think there's a law, and I'm not sure about what the law actually says, that if you're in a school, if your child is in a underperforming school for 3 years, I think you can apply to get them moved. Now, the availability of spots in schools and those kind of things is not always there. So the scenario certainly is one that needs to be fixed. I would like, and we would like at ATPE to have a dialogue about what would the optimum system look like. How would we do some of the things that the representatives have talked about, which is remove some of the obstacles to really focusing on the child. Let me just give you just a couple of things that we think are going to be important. The goals and mandates are definitely a problem. When the target moves every 2 years, when the legislature decides to meet, that's a problem. I was meeting yesterday with a number of other teacher organizations with the Commissioner of Education, and one of the things that was clear, whether you're a union or not a union, is, teachers get asked every 2 years to change the way they're evaluated, the targets change. How many of you in your profession literally have something change that often on you? It's very difficult to get growth and achievement when the target's moving. Teaching is not a destination profession. Did you all know that there was a 24% reduction in teacher certification last year in the state of Texas? In 2012, 24% fewer people got teacher certifications. How many people knew that in 2012 the lines crossed on traditionally certified teachers and alternatively certified teachers? In fact, 51% of the 18,000 certificates that were issued in the state of Texas went to alternatively certified educators, people who did not go through a traditional UT, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, you name it, program. So it's not a destination profession any longer. Could you blame people for not choosing teaching as a destination program in the future? So as we look at what we have to do, I think there are some things that have to be acknowledged. If you're a Black or Hispanic student in the state of Texas, you're 4 times more likely to be enrolled in the state's poorest schools, period. No debating it. If you're in a high poverty district, you have significantly fewer high quality teachers. It's just a fact. And that's by the evaluation systems that we currently have set up. If you're a student from a low income family, proven fact, you have little to no chance of being tested for the gifted and talented programs in this state. And lastly, if you are a student who is eligible for free or reduced price meals, you're highly likely, more than 10 times more likely to be enrolled in a low performing school. I didn't want to go into the social aspect of this today, but poverty is a major driver of educational success. 25% of the kids in the Texas school systems have a BMI of more than 25, which means they're medically obese, which means that their ability to learn, their potential to get diabetes, to get health problems, dental problems are the number one reason for absenteeism in schools today. Kids have teeth problems that aren't being fixed. So this is bigger than just the amount of money we're spending on education per capita. It's a whole systemic issue that has to be addressed, and acknowledging that if you want to keep Vicki Godsey, my wife, in the classroom, give her a little chance to do what she can really do, which is educate students. Take the time. She She told me last night, she said, you know, I gave up on teachable moments 5 to 10 years before I actually, because I couldn't do it. I practiced the tax test, STAR test, the whatever it is, every day in my classroom. Every day. Every day, that's all I did. I didn't teach any civics. I didn't teach other things. So the scenario that we're facing is one that can, I think, be fixed, certainly. And I think that money is one of the things, but it's not the only thing. Collectively, I think we can all aspire to do what Mr. Golson said, which is put students first in the state of Texas. Now, I expected we'd have some disagreement. I don't hear a lot of disagreement on this. I think that we can disagree maybe on the amount of money and resources that we put into it and whether that's really going to change things or not. In closing, there were a couple of things that I plucked out. Again, I'm learning right now. I'm not an educational expert, but there's something called the NAEP, which is the National, whatever it stands for. It's Educational Proficiency. Okay. I just want to read this to you because to me it was powerful. Does more money matter? Effective spending. Overall, the study found that among students from similar family backgrounds, those who come from states with higher per pupil spending do better on the NAEP. Just as importantly, the higher scoring states tend to spend their funds in certain ways, getting to what the representative was talking about. They tend to spend their funds on programs designed to lower pupil-teacher ratios, support pre-K. I know that if a kid doesn't speak at least 300 to 400 words, by the time they get to kindergarten, they're going to be 2 grades behind. It's a fact. So if we aren't taking care of kids to get them up to speed even before they get to kindergarten, there's a problem. The third one is provide teachers with adequate resources, and then the fourth is reduce the need to hire inexperienced teachers by reducing teacher turnover. Stabilizing the teaching profession is going to be key. I spoke to a aspiring group of students from Houston Tillotson College, and I mean, they were bright-eyed and ready to tackle the world. And I also heard from the commissioner yesterday that some universities are coming up with unique programs where they are demanding, and we believe this at ATPE, that the bar ought to be raised on who becomes a teacher. If you have a 2.0 grade point average, you shouldn't get a teaching certificate. I mean, we believe that. You should raise your bar on that. These students have the aspiration to make a difference in the lives of kids in Texas. So with that, thank you for allowing me to ramble on just a little bit and give you a little bit of what I'm viewing, and I appreciate your attention and look forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Gary, thank you very much. We have about 20 minutes for Q&A. And Alice, this room is so big. Do you think you could walk around with a microphone? And if y'all could please wait for her to get to you when I call you. We have, again, the acoustics are kind of weird in a room this long, so it'll be much easier for everyone to hear your question if she can get the mic to you. So with that, does anybody have questions? Yes, ma'am, right here up front.
Mr. Godsey, what are some of the solutions? You raised my hopes that maybe you have some solutions. What are they?
Well, we believe that, like I just said, that we should aspire to get teachers more rigorously certified in the state of Texas. We believe that that's important. That oftentimes many of our members say, a person who comes in alternatively certified hasn't had the classroom experience, and that could or could not be true. But we also have to embrace the fact that there are people coming into the profession who didn't go through traditional programs. So concentrating on how we can develop teachers, how we can give them a good experience. And then the commissioner told me yesterday that teachers graduating from Dallas Baptist University can go back for tune-ups at no charge back to the university. Good idea. Good idea. The third thing, they have to have an active mentor. Everybody I've talked to in the teaching profession said that their biggest disappointment was in their first year of teaching. Even though they were assigned a mentor, it was like this. Your erasers are over there, your Magic markers are there. There's paper there. Good luck. So developing and cultivating an active mentorship program is going to be important. The third piece is addressing the community from a global standpoint as opposed to just viewing it from a school standpoint. I worked for United Way for 30 years. I ran the United Way in Dallas and Austin, 2 other states. And, you know, it doesn't matter what your politics are, Democrat, Republican, left, right, poverty is a huge issue in educating students and aspiring to give them a way to get past some of the obstacles is one of the solutions. We invented a program in Dallas called Destination Graduation. We put it in the 3 lowest performing high schools up there. Totally turned it around. But it was a complete comprehensive set of services that was being given to students who didn't have the opportunity to get it on their own. So those are just a few general ideas about what we might be doing. The fifth one, give the teachers a chance to develop the program. Give them a chance to come in and really tell you what's going to work and not going to work. And lastly, I haven't met a teacher yet who's afraid of an evaluation. But a test score by itself is not an evaluation. Not when you look at all the other factors that go into that. So, too long an answer, but.
Jeff?
It seems like this debate is parallel with the one we're having on healthcare right now, and where we're either going to perfect a very large centralized system with all of its rules, like we're sitting right there, or we're going to focus on where everything happens, which is either between the doctor and the patient or between the teacher and the student. That's where the learning is happening. And my question is to Chairman Grusendorf, and then with the response from the other panelists, do you have any expert witnesses talk about in that trial about what the impact would be on teachers if you had more competition and more choice for parents? Because it seems like most of the private schools I know of have very few administrators, and everything is focused on well-paid teachers and a good classroom environment for kids and where the learning takes place. Was that addressed in the trial?
Absolutely, and Jeff, thank you for that question. We didn't set that up, but I wish we had. That's a great question because, yeah, in the trial, one of the really interesting aspects of this, and you were talking about the school choice issue, and I want to correct a couple of points you made there, if I can, as well, in a minute when we get back to it, James. But during the trial, the school districts hired a Harvard expert, Dr. Jacob. Can't remember his last name now. I just blanked out. But anyway, the Harvard expert the school districts hired, Jacob Vigdor is his name, Dr. Jacob Vigdor, testified that we shouldn't have school choice in Texas, folks. Because you know what? School districts would have to pay their teachers more. The competition for their services would drive up teacher pay, and that wouldn't be good because school districts have to pay teachers more. We had an expert from the state, one of the witnesses for the state, another economist, said, hey, under oath, these people testifying under oath, if you had school choice, teacher salaries would go up due to the competitive pressures. Where our own witness for the efficiency interveners said, hey, our research indicates the metropolitan area teachers would make as much as $12,000 a year more than they make today in a competitive environment, such environment that the Taxpayer Savings Grant Program would cause in the state of Texas. So I think this is one of the best kept secrets in the state of Texas and nationally, that teacher pay is actually repressed, and this is one of the issues that I alluded to in my slide, but didn't have enough time to go into it. Because of the monopsonistic system, not monopoly, but monopsonistic, and monopoly is where you have one provider. A monopsony is when you have one buyer. So because we restrict the buyers, school districts have a virtual monopoly over hiring teachers, and therefore they can keep the salaries lower than they otherwise would be in a free market. So one of the best, I mean, teachers would win if you have more competition. Students would win if you have more competition. Taxpayers would win because if you have more competition. And back on the competition issue, our research indicates that the average private school is not $12,000, folks. In fact, most private schools in the state of Texas, most Catholic schools in the state of Texas, which are the biggest private school providers in the state, are about $5,000 for a K-12 education. So this $12,000 is just a smokescreen. Let's look at the facts. Sure, you have the Hockadays and the very elite institutions, but the rank and file kids could go to school. And one other thing, while I've got the floor, James, would you pull up that Yes Prep slide?
I'm not sure I know which one that is. I can try to.
It's back on the, it's a part of, it wasn't part of my presentation. It was back at the tail end.
Tail end. Okay. Got.
During trial, under oath, we had testimony about the Yes Prep Academy. And you were talking about the disadvantaged kids, and you know we have problems with demographics. There's a definite correlation between demographics and achievement. Yes Prep Academy has about 70 or 80% of their kids economically disadvantaged. 100% of them go to college. They spend less money than we do in the state of Texas. We need to free teachers and free superintendents to do the best job they can do instead of imposing all these rules and regulations on them from the top and tying their hands. Teachers are the experts. Let them teach and get the darn government out of the way and let us use our money most efficiently. We'd solve the litigation crisis. We'd solve our financial crisis, and kids would get a much better education.
Is Yes Prep a private schools or
Charter school,
Okay,
charter
charter
school.
school. So
We need-
we're not opposed to that at all at ATP. We
We
think
need-
there should be,
you know,
charter schools.
There's not
are good.
really any reason to have an artificial legislative cap on the number of charter schools.
Yeah.
Charter schools are a constitutional school system. In fact, the legislature has said they're constitutional.
What about the private?
Every one of them doesn't do a great job, but some of them do a better job. So why is there a cap, an artificial cap? Now, you raised it a little bit, just a little teeny 90 bit last year. But why have any cap at all on a system that's working well for a lot of kids? And like I said, charter schools aren't perfect for every kid. Public schools not perfect for every kid. Why not let the kid decide or the parents decide what's best for that particular kid? Individualize education. Don't try to put one size fits all system in place for every kid.
I think Gary would like to follow up.
No, I'm not playing dumb here. I'm trying to understand this a little bit better. Charter schools, we don't have a problem with charter schools. Private schools, we don't have a problem with private schools. We do have a problem with public education funds being spent in private education environment with no accountability for the public education funds. And I will tell you, factually, if you send your kid to a private school, they're going to get screened. You can't just show up out of any neighborhood in Texas and go say, I want to send my kid to that private school, and they're going to be automatically accepted. It just isn't going to happen. So the equity in all of that probably, it sounds good, but the minute they start screening students, they're going to look at all kinds of characteristics and who's going to be allowed to come into their private school. I don't know. It just seems like it's not as simple. And of course, none of this is as simple as it sounds when we're sitting up here talking about it, or we'd already have it figured out.
Next question, please.
Yeah, my question is to anybody in the panel. I'm gonna be loud. Can y'all hear me in the back?
Please use it.
Okay, so my question is, how do we put the students first when districts have to separate these low-income students from these other schools? How do you why all students, not just the students that can succeed, how do you put all students first? Because that's not what's happening in Texas. I come from Austin, born and raised, and we were from a lower socioeconomic family, but we got a good education. So why are lower socioeconomic students getting a poor education in Texas when it wasn't that way? And how do we go back to what worked? If it worked, well, how do we get to teaching to a test that doesn't prepare kids to live in the world? How do we get there And how do we get back to providing education to make kids be successful?
Man, that's a powerful question, and I don't have an answer for it.
Yeah,
You want to take a shot?
You can take a shot at it.
I'll let you try it.
I'm taking too much time up here.
Well, I think the challenge is you can't make a kid be successful. You cannot force a kid. You can give them opportunity to be successful, and that goes back to that, I think most kids that are successful out of a poor environment typically have a great teacher somewhere along the line, but also have parents that are somewhere involved in it, and that's a bigger societal issue. I think one of the challenges that we get bogged up in is everybody tries at the federal level, state level to micromanage it, and we get kind of tangled up in our own good intentions, and we don't allow teachers to teach. We don't allow parents to parent. And so I think we just need to be very careful. Really, I say really as a state legislator, we need to be very careful and understand that and the federal government certainly needs to be, well, they need a lot of things, but needs to be aware that any law that we put in place really takes teachers out of the classroom, because that law is going to take money to implement and professionals to implement. And so we are hurting the very thing that we are trying to help. It's kind of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Our good intentions are killing the kids.
I am going to follow up on that too. I think that's a great question. You know, the truth of the matter is we're not serving our inner city kids very well. The worst teachers tend to get assigned to those campuses that are doing a bad job, and we got a system that keeps recycling and failing many of our kids. And as I said in my presentation, thousands of kids in the state of Texas are trapped in failing schools. I think there's just one way. There is no magic formula, folks, that we can, hey, as a state of Texas, this is what we're going to do. We're going to solve every problem in the state of Texas. There is no magic formula. If there was, it would have been put in place a long time ago. We got to, as Ron Wilson said on the House floor in 1995 or so, set my kids free. Give us a choice. Allow us the best education possible for my individual needs, not the needs of all those other kids over there that have different needs than I do. I'm an individual. This school fits me best, or this school fits me best. It's not the same for everybody. That's the essence of freedom, folks. And one other thing I would like, with all due respect, and I agree with a lot of what you said.
We don't even know.
But when
each
we
other.
talk about, used the term public funds. Well, I had a slide dealing with that.
That's
Because of time restrictions, I took it off. What are public funds, folks? They're your dollars. There's no such thing as public funds. The 1883 Constitution, which allowed school districts to be formed, allows voters to establish school districts. It allows voters to approve taxes for school districts. It doesn't change the nature of the system, but one thing it does, it says that money isn't your school districts, it's held in trust for the kids. It does not belong to school districts. It's held in trust for the kids in the state of Texas. That's why your school boards are not called board of directors, they're called school trustees.
I got an idea. I think I've got an answer to your question. If the parents of school kids in Texas would take back the public education system, we could fix it. And if the teachers in Texas public schools voted, they could change anything they wanted to. So parent ownership, people really going and exercising their capacity to make changes at the ballot box might allow us to do some of the things you're talking about.
Just a segue on that, you're right. Parents can only take it back, though, if the decisions are allowed to be made locally. Because there is no way a parent can get to Austin. It's really funny because, people say, well, nobody showed up at this meeting. Most people in Wichita Falls or Pasadena, they don't know what's going on in Austin. They shouldn't have to really care most of the time. So we need to allow the local decision making, and then parents can take their school district back. But what you get told when you get involved at the school is, well, sorry, that decision's not made here. That's made in Austin or Washington. So that's the reason that you need, I say if we make a mistake in Wichita Falls, we affect 15,000 people. If you make a mistake, 15,000 kids, 100,000 people. If you make a mistake in Austin, you affect 5 million kids. and 20-something thousand. And obviously, when we have mistakes made at the federal level, it affects everybody, and we can never correct it.
We have one, maybe two more questions.
Okay.
So,
I'm going to capitalize on every teacher's magic word is teachable moment. I have 7 charter schools. We get a piece of coal in the form of a letter from TEA just before Christmas. They want to shut our schools down. On the 4 indexes, we have one of the top middle schools in the state of Texas, in the Dallas area. We have one of the top high schools in Oak Cliff in the state of Texas. On the index on math, science, and writing, we're there. On the index on closing the gap, we're there. There's an index number 4, which is graduation rate, and we have a letter from one of the directors in TEA. It says, this no longer affects you under the old rules, but due to the new legislation that was passed, it's retroactive to 2009. And they say, it's just like end of course exams now. You have a kid in the 6th grade that's passed all the tests from 3rd, 4th, 5th, and even the 6th grade, but the law would say, oh, we didn't have that test back then, but we've passed a law now that you've got to go back and take those tests to be qualified. We have the top financial rating. We have great reserves. Each of our kids have iPads, smart boards, and we're doing a great job. But there was a word in the bill that says, the commissioner shall close you. Not any reasoning, not any chance for good judgment, but the rules that, so that means that we'll have to end up, hopefully, because TA is working with us, trying, but like one teacher said, if you can't teach, you pass legislation that keeps us from teaching. We've got to change that. But my question is to each of you, how can you help us keep kids learning, the ones that you're particularly talking about, in low-income areas that are succeeding? So I'd take any suggestions you might have. Thank you.
What school are you with in Dallas?
This is, okay, the one in Dallas, we call the Honors Academy. We have
Okay.
7 schools.
Mhm.
And the one in Oak Cliff and the one in Farmers
Yeah.
Branch are the ones that are.
I didn't understand your question.
Okay, my question is, TEA is going to close us down because they're succeeding at educating kids. How can you help me keep TEA from closing down
Oh.
because of Index 4 that no longer affects us? It's being judged, even the director at TEA says the new rule.
I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be able to answer the question, but I would say, I won't put them on the public spot, but I think we need to talk to your rep and senator and figure out really is that, and that's really what a rep's for. I call myself Drano now. You know, it's like when you get a problem, people in your district can call you and you can try to work through it. And so I would just say you need to get with your rep. I'm not sure that any of us are going to have the answers to that question, but I think your rep and senator can help you get that.
How can you keep that from happening in the future? Because we're
I
gonna be-
mean, I can tell you that is right. Yeah, I mean, just write better laws and less of them.
Read the law.
That would be helpful, actually. That would, yeah. One of the best books I ever read is "You Think We Read These Laws," written by a California legislator. You really ought to read it. It's a great read. Very short. Yeah. I do read the laws, by the way. I don't want to go on record as saying that. I do.
ladies and gentlemen, I am very sorry. We are actually out of time. We must clear the room now. For our next panel on immigration, I hope you all enjoyed. Please thank our panelists.